to pretty much put the Obama administration, the former administration, on the defense.
But now you have Corey Lewandowski doubling, tripling down and saying maybe there's a wiretap of a U.S. senator.
They did spend time listening to conversations between then-Senator Jeff Sessions and the ambassador to Russia. What other conversations did they listen in on?
Spokesman for the former president saying the Obama White House never ordered surveillance, they say, on any U.S. citizen.
Bottom line is you still have an administration using investigative tools to go after a political opponent, and that's a very scary business.
Supporters of President Trump holding rallies across the country. Today's events are called March for Trump.
This is about America first, and I support this president and all the things that he's doing, and that's why I'm here today.
There's at least a couple dozen of these anti-Trump protests. Their goal was to shut down any support for President Trump. In Berkeley, California, protesters went up to the group and started arguing, which led to shoving and fist flying.
Such a great country, and I think a lot of people don't look at that. We are so blessed in so many ways by what we have, and I think Trump is really there to help us get even better again.
Well, and I love some of the best things in life are totally accidental. He's like, I'm bringing my kids to work, play with dough. Turns out they're awesome now.
17 million people see their video of
Carmine Pizza. They have mobile pizza kitchens, by the way, so you can...
Well, I told him we ought to get him to Washington instead of Jersey City because he's talking about the pizza bringing people together. They got to do that in Washington right now because there's a whole lot of fighting.
Thank you for bringing us all back together.
Such a beautiful segue.
All right, we do want to get right to our top story this morning. New questions from President Trump this morning about the Democratic Party 24 hours after accusing the Obama administration of spying on him during the campaign.
That's right. Our own Kristen Fisher is live outside Mar-a-Lago with an update from the president. Good morning, Kristen.
Hey, good morning, guys. Gosh, you know, my head is still spinning from all the allegations and accusations that came out yesterday, but already President Trump is on to more tweets that lead to even more questions. He had one tweet about Russian President Vladimir Putin. He was also tweeting about the hacks over the summer into the DNC. Here's that tweet, quote, "Is it true that the DNC would not allow the FBI access to check server or other equipment after learning that it was hacked? Can that be possible?" So is President Trump advancing the narrative onto another topic, as his supporters say, or is he being the deflector in chief, which is what Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi called him yesterday by trying to shift the focus away from his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions? But President Trump's former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, said last night that the Sessions story and the wiretap story are essentially the same thing. He then accused the former administration of possibly wiretapping Sessions' Senate office to listen to his conversation with the Russian ambassador. Listen to this.
This previous administration has said that they were aware of the conversation on two different occasions where then-Senator Jeff Sessions met with the ambassador, one time during the Republican National Convention, but more importantly, the second time that he met with was in the United States Senate office in a federal building, and they were monitoring what a United States senator was having a private conversation with, is what I understand. And if that is the case, that's very concerning.
Now, last night, Lewandowski offered no hard proof, and so far, neither has President Trump to back up his bombshell of a claim yesterday that former President Barack Obama had ordered the wiretapping of phones inside Trump Tower during the election. But remember, a president is often privy to a lot more information than you or I would typically have. And in fact, the New York Times is reporting that senior White House official a senior White House official said that Don McGahn, who's the president's chief counsel, was working to secure access to what McGahn believed to be an order issued by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, authoring some type of surveillance regarding or related to Mr. Trump. And that court is the FISA court, the highly secretive court. We'll see if something comes out on that today. But, you know, so far, radio silence from the White House communications staff, though a deputy press secretary is expected to be on another Sunday show this morning. So hopefully we'll get some answers later today. Right. Back to you.
Kristen, you've been working all hours of the day. Nice work out there.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks.
Now we're going to bring in David Bossie. He's the former Deputy Executive Director of the Trump Transition Team and a Fox News contributor. David, thank you very much for joining us. You've been involved with the Trump campaign and transition and from the inside. What do you make of the last 24 hours, starting with the president's tweets, the reaction to it in the media, and your take on where this goes from here?
Well, I think the president's pushing back because the Democrats in this permanent campaign of obstruction. They can't get over the election defeat in November. This is just a continuation of their permanent campaign against President Trump to delegitimize him and to really affect how he operates in a day-to-day basis. So, look, when President Obama was there, it was fine for President Obama to talk to Putin, for him to tell him our relationship's going to be different. It was fine for the Clinton Foundation to try to recruit investors into what was called the Russian Silicon Valley project. It's fine for us when it's Democrats to want to work with Russia and to build our relationship. But President Trump, they're using the Russian relationship in a very dangerous way for political purposes. I find that to be, quite honestly, revolting. I think the Democrat Party needs to be held responsible for what they're doing. We know there were things going on with the Russians, but this is a bridge too far.
All right, David, you were an investigator for Congress during Whitewater, so I want to get your thoughts on former President Obama's statement to this yesterday. I'll read this to you. He says, a cardinal rule of the Obama administration was that no White House official ever interfered with any independent investigation led by the Department of Justice. As part of that practice, neither President Obama nor any White House official ever ordered surveillance on any U.S. citizen. Any suggestion otherwise is simply false. What do you make of that?
Well, when you parse the words, President Obama, he says ordered. Of course, the word ordered, of course he wouldn't have done that. He couldn't have done that. The FISA court could do it. That would not be the same thing. So, and President Obama and his team, who use Alinsky-like tactics his entire 8 years, uses that to his advantage to try to deflect from them. But we need to find out, and I'll tell you, I think that President Trump needs to pull together a tremendous team of investigators, lawyers, and communicators to put together exactly what happened in a very expeditious manner and disgorge it to the American people so that it is not the drip, drip, drip of what we did to President Clinton, meaning what President Clinton allowed to have happen. It ate up his presidency because we continued to uncover, as I served as chief investigator from the Senate Whitewater Committee all the way through the campaign finance and Chinese espionage cases, all the way up through impeachment of President Clinton. Mm-hmm. And it was the drip, drip, drip that really did the damage to President Clinton. And I think that we just need to disgorge all the information, disgorge it all very quickly. This is all about the investigation of Paul Manafort. It starts and ends really there.
When you make that very point, that this administration has to learn from previous ones and move on from all of this, once the president, as you know, he basically put gasoline on the fire yesterday, what are you hearing from people inside the administration now? Are they going to present evidence to back up his rather dramatic claims and then try to move back to their agenda, or what is the strategy moving forward?
Yeah, Ed, that's a great point. And I think that what the president needs to do is really look at gaining the American people's confidence by putting forward a team and announcing that we're going to disgorge all the information, gather and put out for the American people, because there's nothing to see here. I know it. I was the deputy campaign manager. I never saw any of this. This is a ridiculous red herring by the left.
So how do you do that, David? I don't mean to interrupt, but the White House communications team has had weeks now to do that. How do they finally get ahead of this?
Well, look, I mean, and these folks in the communications shop are friends of mine. They are highly competent, very good people. But I think the president giving himself a C+ on his communications is right. And I think that he needs to get better, and I think his team needs to get better, and I think they're learning that. But I will say this, they need to get this announcement out. I think they should take very aggressive posture over the next couple of days and transition back to the issues that got him elected, back to immigration, back to tax reform, back to repeal and replace Obamacare. If they do that this week, put together a couple of days, one good day after the other, I think they're back on track.
David, some people are saying that the reason for the Saturday morning tweets about the wiretapping at Trump Tower was reaction to what happened on Friday night, using the word ballistic, that the president was frustrated by the fact that Senator Sessions recused himself in the way that he did and other aspects. Take a listen to what another news network said about that. I want to get your reaction.
Moments before his departure for Florida, President Trump summoned his top aides to an Oval Office meeting where senior White House sources tell ABC News the president went ballistic, erupting at them in anger. Sources tell ABC News Trump's anger had been brewing since Thursday, when Attorney General Jeff Sessions caught him by surprise by recusing himself from any investigations into Russia's meddling in the 2016 campaign.
So, David, ballistic, and the banner says West Wing chaos. You talk to people at the White House. What are you hearing?
Well, look, these people are trying their very hardest, but they need to do a better job for the president. The president has them there to protect him and the interests that got us elected in November. So I would just say, and they mean well, and they're trying very hard. They need to bring in people who can and will do this job solely and not have 100 other things on their plates. That's a big part of this. They need to be singularly focused on putting this behind them so that they can get back to repealing and replacing Obamacare and immigration and tax reform.
Ed, it is understandable that there's some frustration there because he feels like that he lost one of his main players when it comes to this investigation.
Yeah, and David, I want to get on this point, though. I don't mean to interrupt, but you can jump in here. But I've known you a long time. I'm reading what you're saying, that people in the White House are not serving this president well. I'm not trying to put words in it. I want you to be clear. And it seems that you're saying to get back to immigration and other issues, they need to make changes. I'm hearing that from you.
No, I think they need to make additions. That's the president's call on changes. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying these people are overworked. They are working incredibly hard. But the problem is there's not enough of them, and so they need to have some support brought in. And that's all. That's what I believe the next step is. But I also believe that General Sessions, for the Attorney General, I was caught off guard as well because I saw from Janet Reno in the 90s, who threw her body in the doorway of every investigation for the Clintons. They had the famous fights with Louis Freeh, the FBI director. You see Holder and Lynch in really these corrupt activities that were going on when they served in that position. And for the Attorney General to feel that he had to recuse himself, I think was just too quick of a decision on that. I don't think it was necessary. I think the Attorney General could have been fair, but he served in the campaign, and I think he was getting advice to the contrary.
David, final point. We had J. Christian Adams, former justice official, last hour telling us that what the president may have been really angry about Friday is the idea that Sessions recusing himself now leaves career bureaucrats in charge of this investigation because there's no deputy attorney general who's been confirmed. Chuck Schumer is blocking a lot of the nominations out there. So, and basically he said last hour that the swamp won, and that's why the president is frustrated. What do you think about that?
I think that's a very good point. Chuck Schumer now has a lot of power. If he continues to obstruct, whether it's the cabinet members or the sub-cabinet, these deputy spots across the government, he can slow down President Trump's agenda. President Trump, in my book, I think that Reince Priebus and the rest of the senior staff at the White House really has to make some tough decisions to clean out what's going on at Justice and at the other departments from a bureaucracy standpoint.
Yeah, and get more of his people in there.
That's right.
Spot on. David Bossie, good to have you here this morning to break this all down. Really appreciate that.
Great. Thanks for having me.
The mainstream media says there's no evidence to support the president's wiretapping claims. But President Obama's own former speechwriter says not so fast. Chris Wallace here to react next.
And we know how Vicente Fox feels about President Trump's big, beautiful border wall.
I am not going to pay for this wall. Let him pay for it.
Well, wait until you hear what he thinks about the wiretapping.
Well, you heard the statement yesterday from President Obama's office that he did not order the wiretapping of Trump Tower, but his own former speechwriter warned reporters, I'd be careful about reporting that Obama said there was no wiretapping. Statement just said that neither he nor the White House ordered it. Important distinction.
Yeah, it is, very much so. A big caveat. Here to react, Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace. Chris, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, Chris.
Some are pointing to where's the evidence? Is there evidence? And in some say that tweet right there is evidence that there's a lot of hedging from the former Obama administration employees, which makes it look like something happened, something was ordered, or something was conducted at Trump Tower.
Well, that's possible. It could also be that Jon Favreau who is a very clever guy and has a sense of humor, might just be trolling the Trump people and saying, well, maybe it did happen. I wouldn't read too much into Jon Favreau and what he said there. Look, the president made an explosive charge. He says that former President Obama wiretapped him and compares it to Nixon and Watergate and McCarthyism. And the White House has so far failed to come up with any evidence for that charge. So really the obligation is on them to prove it happened, not on the Obama White House to prove it didn't happen.
Chris, why do you think that is? Because he made this huge statement, as you said, on Twitter yesterday morning during our show, and leaving us all to try to figure out what's going on here. We have not heard from the White House, as you said, since his tweet yesterday morning. You understand the inner workings of the West Wing and how they might be able to maneuver something like this. What do you think is going on, and why do you think we haven't heard yet?
Well, you got to figure, I mean, they knew we were all going to be talking about it today, that if they had hard evidence, that they would have put it out. I mean, that just seems to be logical. I mean, there are a couple of issues here. One is that if there was that kind of a wiretap, it actually would be classified, and it would be, if not illegal, because the president can declassify, highly unusual for him, even if it was a wiretap of him, to release information about a classified wiretap. I mean, it would be part of an investigation, and in a sense, by revealing it, he would be interfering with that investigation. There is another possibility that we all have to consider, and that is that the president has no evidence, that he just went off on this, that he had heard about it from various sources and went off on it. And we do know that he was very upset about the fact that he'd had a very good week, he had had a successful speech, he was pushing his agenda, and that all of that then got waylaid by the information, the disclosure of Jeff Sessions and the fact that he hadn't told the Judiciary Committee about his relationship. So the possibility that he just... It was a fit of temper is out there.
Who do you have on today to chew over all this?
We're going to be talking to the Senate Intelligence Committee. We're going to be talking to Tom Cotton and ask him what evidence he's seen. If anybody has, he will have. We'll also talk to Chris Coons, who, interestingly enough, talks about FBI transcripts. We'll ask him about that.
All right. Chris Wallace, no one better to break all of this down with insights. We appreciate it.
We look forward to it, Chris. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. You will move the story along. Thank you, sir. All right. It was supposed to be a peaceful show of support for President Trump, but instead they came under attack by violent protesters and a mob. When will this stop? We're live in Washington.
Plus, tech stocks are booming thanks to the president, but will news of the possible wiretap put a stop to it? Stuart Varney here with what it all means for your wallet. That's next.
Welcome back. We've got some quick headlines for you. A manhunt underway in connection with a possible hate crime. Police say a gunman walked up to a Sikh man near Seattle, telling him to go back to your own country before shooting him in the arm. The victim's injuries are unfortunately not serious. And another Jewish cemetery desecrated. A New York State assemblyman tweeting out these pictures of 5 toppled tombstones and police activity at a cemetery in Brooklyn. It's the latest in a very unfortunate wave of incidents like it across the country, like in St. Louis, where 170 tombstones were knocked over 2 weeks ago.
Just horrible. Thank you, Pete. Well, investors predicting that the stock market's tech rally spurred by the president is far from over. But will this new controversy about the White House wiretapping put a stop to it?
And here to weigh in, no one better, host of Varney & Company on FBN, my friend.
Hardest working man in television.
Oh, I like all of this. That's a really good introduction. Shall I give you a straight answer?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. If this turmoil bleeds over and affects the president's legislative schedule of deregulation and tax cuts, if that happens, if it bleeds over and delays it, yes, it will affect the stock market.
Well, we just had David Bossie, one of his former senior advisors, an outside advisor. He's not working in the White House, but he was very blunt in saying that they've got to get this information about Russia out, get it behind them to move on to issues like immigration, repealing, replacing Obamacare, and the economic issues you talk about, regulation, and, of course, tax reform.
Look, we had on the screen just a moment ago this whopping great big stock market rally. The Dow Industrials are up, what, 2,600 points since the election. And that's all about growth. President Trump wants to grow the economy. tax cuts, deregulate, grow the economy. If this turmoil, and that's the best word I can find to use, if this turmoil affects that schedule, if we don't get the tax cuts signed, sealed, delivered by August, or certainly the fall, then yes, this stock market looks perilously high, and you could come down a little bit.
I mean, President Trump, he's at his best, right, when he's talking about jobs, when he's talking about the economy. That's when his numbers are soaring, and that's what the American people ultimately want to hear right now. Isn't that all the more motivation for him, though, as Ed was saying, to get out everything that they have when it comes to Russia, to say, we've got to just end this thing because we've got to move on to more important things?
I would say isolate it to the executive branch of government and don't let it bleed over into the legislative branch of government. There are plenty of people who say, look, if we get that tax cut in place by August, we can still go up some more on the market. I'm not one of those, but there are people who say, yes, the second leg is coming. But if this stuff that's going on now interferes with that schedule and we don't get that tax cut late on the line this year, I think we've got a problem.
I mean, absent, Stuart, you follow this every single day, absent of videotape or an audio that shows that President Trump is right and the Democrats' accusations of Russian interference or collusion are wrong, how do they get past the permanent campaign in the left-stream media that's going to try to trickle this and drip it no matter what?
It's very difficult because the president is fighting his own bureaucracy, holdovers from the Obama administration, which are going to selectively leak stuff as long as they're in a position to selectively leak stuff. And that's damaging for the president.
So look ahead to the markets this week, because you also had news on interest rate hikes as well at the end of the week. So what is that? You throw that into the mix, and that's a big deal.
Actually, interest rate hikes on this occasion are good news for the stock market, because it means that the Federal Reserve believes the economy is growing.
So stop the 0% borrowing. We can finally get back to a normal.
That's going to come to an end. Interest rates are rising, but for once, for many, many years, this is a good sign. Again, it means we are growing the economy. And that's what investors want. They want 3 or 4% growth. They want more profits. They want to run that market up, and they've done so already. They want another leg up. That's what they really,
you
really
know
want.
them, you love them. This Passion live, 9 a.m. tomorrow on FBN. Don't miss it.
We love that passion. Stuart, good to have you this morning.
Coffee helps, baby.
Coffee helps a lot of us in the morning.
President Trump has called Democrats hypocrites for slamming him over his Russian ties while having Russian relationships of their own. Does he have a point? Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan, a Democrat, joins us live next.
And we certainly know how Vicente Fox feels about President Trump's big, beautiful border wall.
I am not going to pay for this wall. Let him pay for it.
He might end up paying for it, but wait until you hear what he thinks about the wiretapping. Stick around for that. Citizens across the nation showing their support for our commander-in-chief.
But counter-protesters also showed up at the March for Trump rallies, attempting to shut down any support for the president.
Lauren Blanchard live in Washington, D.C. with just how ugly things got. Good morning, Lauren.
Good morning. Well, things did get ugly during what was supposed to be a day for Trump fans to come out and exercise their right to free speech by peacefully showing their support for the president. The couple hundred pro-Trump supporters expected here at Berkeley were met by counter-protesters, some wearing face masks, all-out brawls breaking out at Berkeley, that famously liberal college in California. And check this out. Anti-Trump supporters even antagonizing an old man, leading to even more fighting. 10 people were arrested and 7 injured, although none were hospitalized, when the shouting matches between the two sides at Berkeley turned into fistfights and scuffles.
These guys look like the thugs from Nazi Germany that they claim to be against. They say no fascism. They're acting like fascists. They dress like fascists. They look like fascists. They are the fascists.
There were pro-Trump rallies planned in about 50 cities across the country. While many remained peaceful, the handful that did turn ugly are taking over headlines this morning. One rally organizer in Austin told us she planned the rally because despite all the protests recently against the president, she wanted to show that he did have support. And this as the president spends another weekend down in West Palm Beach, Florida, getting out of his limo yesterday to wave at the well-wishers. Pete, Abby, Ed.
All right, Lauren Blanchard for us this morning. Thank you, Lauren.
Such a display of tolerance when counter-protesters beat the crap out of protesters.
All right.
Wonderful.
What better way to
You know
transition
what?
to a congressman,
Let's bring in Ohio Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan. Let's start right with that, because we were just talking about these protests, and you've seen them play out across this country for months now. Many of the Democrats up in arms over losing the election and things that they're passionate about. But here you see in Berkeley, California, we could pull up some of this video of people starting fights with just because they're out there protesting their support for President Trump. What do you make of that? And where's the decency in this country anymore?
There's no place for violence. I think there is a lot of anger out there, but there's absolutely no place for violence. I think as Democrats, as progressives, we should have a nonviolent protest. It's appropriate for us to participate and to speak our mind and to stand tall and to oppose, but it should always be done in a nonviolent way.
Congressman, you took on Nancy Pelosi. You tried to become the House Democratic leader just a few months ago, and you're trying to move your party more towards, jobs and talking about the white working class that you feel like maybe the party got away from in the last election. Now you see, though, that things turned on Nancy Pelosi a little bit this week after bashing the president again and again for ties to Russia. All of a sudden, these pictures emerge. She met with the same Russian ambassador as well. What do you think? Are Democrats on defense a little on this?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, obviously, a lot of people in political life meet with ambassadors. The question is, do the ambassadors try to influence a campaign? How many meetings are going on? The fact that Flynn has resigned, Sessions has recused himself, and we still don't know about Trump's business ties to Russia, speak volumes, I think, about what's going on here. And the fact that everybody lied about it, quite frankly. Like, if you're having these meetings, fine. Just say you're having the meetings. Don't lie about it, because when you lie, that shows that maybe you are hiding something.
Are you saying that you believe the Attorney General lied?
I personally believe that he did. He misled the Senate. He misled the country. He knew he had meetings with the Russian ambassador. This is all after the Flynn deal, too, let's remember. So you put it in the context. Flynn just was blowing up, and then he's going to completely forget that he had meetings with the two meetings with the Russian's ambassador.
But, of course, as you said, everyone or many people in Washington on both sides of the aisle meet regularly with ambassadors, especially folks who would be in future national security positions. Do you not find it curious, though, that all of this information, maybe from FISA courts, maybe from leaks and elsewhere, finds its way into the pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post, and then the outrage comes reflexively from Democrats calling for resignations? Do you feel like this is helpful for a country to immediately impugn, potentially in a criminal way if these leaks are done incorrectly? I mean, do you see a sense that it really undermines the ability to get anything done at all?
Well, the problem is that, as I said, people are lying about these meetings. If you just come clean,
no, but
you're chair of the Senate Foreign Relations.
Nancy Pelosi said she didn't meet with the Russian ambassador, and then the picture came out 2 hours later.
The Russians didn't influence an election in the direction of the Democrats.
Well, there's no
they
proof
influenced
of
the
that.
election. Now, whether or not it was enough to turn it, we don't know that question. But clearly, they hacked the DNC, leaked the information, tried to influence it, and then you have all these meetings that are happening with Trump campaign people with the Russian ambassador and Russians, and then lying about it. Meanwhile, they're putting in place in the Republican Party platform that we're going to be soft on Russia in the Ukraine. So, as an American, as someone who sits on the Defense Appropriations Committee, I want to know what's going on here.
But what proof do you have that ultimately, in all of these articles with headlines about Russian collusion, where has there yet to been any proof at all that Trump advisors or Trump campaign folks were colluding with Russians? There's none.
That is what we're trying to find out. We do know that the Russians influenced the election. We do know that they hacked the DNC. The investigation needs to happen as to whether there were connections. But then when people on the campaign are not being forthright with the meetings that they're having with the Russians, all of a sudden it sparks this whole controversy. And what Trump did yesterday was explosive, as Chris Wallace said. If you go, you have to have something initiated by the FBI. It then has to be certified by the Attorney General to go to the FISA court, the Foreign Intelligence Court. Then the Intelligence Court has to find probable cause. The FISA court is appointed by the Supreme Court Justice, which is a George W. Bush appointee, and they have to find probable cause.
Sure. But, Congressman,
so
is there anything
if there
from,
is taps,
yeah,
that's
we've
the
talked
process
about all that,
but
is there anything from the president's big speech to the country that you as a Democrat can work with him on?
I wish if the president was really trying to change the news cycle, he would do it by bringing a $1 trillion transportation infrastructure broadband bill to the Congress. That would certainly change the narrative. Instead of doing these tweets and making up stuff, change the story in the country by bringing us a $1 trillion infrastructure bill.
Are you saying, though, that Democrats aren't part of this media cycle and what we're focused on? Because they paid a ton of attention to Russia and these investigations. You wonder, what do the American people want to hear? What do they care about most? And you've said a lot about the Democrats in this last election cycle losing races across the board. They've got to get back to what the American people care about.
Yep.
How do you say that, and then you see the Democrats today focusing so much on something like this?
Well, I say to the president, bring us a $1 trillion infrastructure bill so we can rebuild the country, drive up wages, put people back to work, and lay broadband fiber all over the country so that we can be ready for the next generation of jobs. That would shift the story right now. And Democrats like me in areas like mine are waiting for the president to do what he said he was going to do during the campaign. He was going to open up the steel mills. He was going to reopen up the coal mines. He had a $1 trillion transportation bill. Bring it. And let's get to work on getting the American people back to work. And he can do this. He can do this. He's the president. He can change the story, and let's get to work.
Congressman Ryan from Ohio says to the president, bring it. Yeah. We appreciate you bringing your insights this morning, sir.
We'll leave it there.
And I mean this non-disparaging. It's true. Democrats are always up for spending $1 trillion. Just saying.
I can't help it. We do have some other headlines we want to get to. Mexico's former president is calling out President Trump again after this comment about a border wall last year. Take a listen.
I am not going to pay for this wall. Let him pay for it.
All right, well, now Vicente Fox defending former President Obama over President Trump's wiretap claims, tweeting this: a so-called president is calling a real president a true leader. Bad and sick guy. What a shame, America. You need to do something now. No response yet from President Trump. Stay tuned. Also, this Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and actor Danny Glover standing with thousands of pro-union protesters outside a Nissan plant in Mississippi. The protesters marching nearly 2 miles to the Canton plant demanding better wages and job security. Nissan responding to the protesters in a statement saying this: Nissan respects and values the Canton workforce, and our history reflects that we recognize the employees' rights to decide for themselves whether or not to have third-party representation. Also this morning, U.S. soccer is the first sport to require players and personnel to stand for our national anthem. The Federation announcing the new rule requiring anyone involved with the team to stand respectfully during the anthem. Of course, this comes after Megan Rapinoe kneeled during several matches last fall. The midfielder said the protest was a nod to Colin Kaepernick. Rapinoe was dropped from the U.S. women's latest national team roster. You like that one, Pete?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, NFL, take note. You can actually enforce rules that people care about. Anyway, we've got a big lineup ahead. Florida Governor Rick Scott joins us live next, plus James Rosen and radio talk show host Mark Levin, also all going to be here live this morning.
Big hour ahead. And these grannies, they have got some game. A couple of ladies getting nationwide attention for their incredible basketball skills. They are going to play against us next hour. That is frightening.
That is awesome.
They're good, too.
And joining us live now, one of the most prominent leaders in the Republican Party, Governor Rick Scott of Florida. Good morning, sir. We appreciate you coming in.
Good morning. I've been watching you this morning. It's chilly up north.
Yeah, I wish I was down in Florida right now, sir. I want to talk to you about Obamacare. That's what we invited you on. But there's obviously this tit for tat going on between President Trump and Democrats in Washington, regardless of who fired the first shot about these Russian investigations and wiretapping. Are you concerned that valuable time is being lost in your effort to repeal and replace Obamacare?
Well, if you go back to the election last year, what do people care about? They really want to get our economy going again, and they also want to make sure the disaster of Obamacare is repealed. We've got to replace it with something that actually works, which drives down costs. You know, and my background is I grew up in public housing. I know we didn't have health care. I ran the largest hospital company. I know we've got to fix this program. President Trump inherited a terrible mess.
He certainly did. And Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky, has been the last several days trying to find, he's made a show of it, and we've got some video of it, looking around, trying to get into basically a secret room in the Capitol where he says the House Republican bill to repeal and replace in Obamacare is being drafted. Are you frustrated that that bill has not been made public, that there's not more transparency in this process right now?
Well, I've met with President Trump, Secretary Price, members of the House and the Senate, and I think we all want to make sure the right thing happens here. So I think the more that we get out there and let people know what the conversation is about, you'll get feedback from individuals like mine. One of the big issues I've got is we are not a state that expanded Medicaid because we know it was not sustainable. It was a disaster. I want to make sure Florida does not get treated worse than a state that took Medicaid expansion because it's not fair to our taxpayers.
Okay, there's a big issue that's developing, and in Washington, there's always talk among Democrats and Republicans, let's do big things. Let's have one big repeal bill and one big replace bill. You have an idea to try to break this up into pieces.
Well, I think it's very difficult. The grand bargains don't seem to work out very well in health care. So I would focus on how do you drive down costs. The biggest issue we have is costs are too high. So how do you do that? Use the free market, allow more competition, let people buy the insurance they want to buy. Don't tell them what they should buy. You know your body better than anybody else. Your family knows what their needs are. Reward people for taking care of themselves. So where I would do it is I would work piece by piece and say, what does everybody agree with now, and do that.
Interesting, because Governor Scott had lunch and dinner with President Trump last weekend. We'll see if he takes some of that advice in the days ahead. Good to have you, Governor.
Have a great day.
You too, sir. We've got a big final hour on tap. The great one is coming in. Not James Rosen. He's coming in. We don't call him the great one, though, even though he is great. Radio talk show host Mark Levin. He's coming in. And Maria Bartiromo. All live this next hour. But up next, we're heading to the racetrack. Now